1.
Warm up.
Pensa alla tua vita di tutti i giorni. Ti lamenti mai per qualcosa? Per esempio, doverti alzare presto, ricevere una paghetta bassa, rifare il letto, riordinare la tua stanza.
Unit 3. Skills and Culture. Exercise 2. Child labour during the Industrial Revolution.
Imagine the life of a 13-year-old from a poor family almost 200 years ago. There were schools, but not all children went to school. Factory workers earned very little money, and children worked because their families needed the money. Life wasn't fun for these children. The work was hard, and the conditions in the factories were very bad. Children did dangerous jobs, and they often had accidents. Most children worked between 12 and 14 hours a day, and they earned about 3 eurocents a day in today's money. Factory workers' families lived in small old houses. Child workers were often hungry and ill, so many of them died young. They had no free time, and they gave all their money to their parents for food. A lot of children started work when they were only 5 years old.
We children started work at the factory at 5 o'clock in the morning. We had a break at 1 o'clock to eat, usually bread and water. Then we finished work at 9 o'clock in the evening. On Saturdays, we often worked until 11 o'clock at night. On Sundays, we went to the factory to clean the machines.
I began work at the factory when I was 9. I worked from early in the morning to late at night. When there was a lot of work, we sometimes worked 17 hours a day.
Culture note. The Industrial Revolution in England started in about 1760. During the next 60 years, Britain changed from an agricultural to an industrial country. People invented machines to do the work people did by hand before. Factories opened, and people moved from the country to the towns to work in the new factories. The Industrial Revolution saw great progress, but a lot of poor people lived terrible and difficult lives. Unit 3. Skills and Culture. Exercise 2. Child labour during the Industrial Revolution.
Imagine the life of a 13-year-old from a poor family almost 200 years ago. There were schools, but not all children went to school. Factory workers earned very little money, and children worked because their families needed the money. Life wasn't fun for these children. The work was hard, and the conditions in the factories were very bad. Children did dangerous jobs, and they often had accidents. Most children worked between 12 and 14 hours a day, and they earned about 3 eurocents a day in today's money. Factory workers' families lived in small old houses. Child workers were often hungry and ill, so many of them died young. They had no free time, and they gave all their money to their parents for food.
Three.
Ascolta il commento di una guida in un museo di storia. Poi leggi le frasi e scegli l'alternativa corretta.
Unit 3. Skills and Culture. Exercise 3.
There were 4 big factories in our town, and lots of children worked in them. Here you can see a room from 1830. You can see it's the room of a very poor family. 2 parents and 6 children lived in one room. There wasn't any water, so it was difficult to wash and clean the room. It was very cold in winter. A family like this spent nearly all their money on food, but they were often hungry. There was no free time for poor people. They worked all day at the factory, came home, ate their dinner, and went to bed, because they got up very early in the morning to start work. It was a very...
Culture and exams.
Unit 3. Culture and Exams. Exercise 1. Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, 1812 to 1870, was a great English writer. He created many famous characters, such as Mr. Scrooge, Oliver Twist, and David Copperfield. Charles Dickens was born on the 7th of February 1812. His father worked in an office, and the family had a happy life. Charles was a good student at school and spent his free time with his 7 brothers and sisters. He loved books and read a lot. Unfortunately, his father had money problems, and he went to prison for a few months in 1824. When Charles visited his father, he saw the terrible conditions in the prison. Charles left school and he worked in a factory to earn money for his family. The conditions in the factory were very bad, and Charles worked hard for 12 hours a day. After 3 years, he returned to school. He never forgot the experience of working in the factory, and he wrote about it in novels such as David Copperfield and Oliver Twist. When Charles left school, he worked in an office, but then he became a journalist. 1836 was an important year for him. He married Catherine Hogarth and wrote his first novel, The Pickwick Papers, about travels in the English countryside. He became a very popular writer. He wrote 16 successful novels. He also travelled to America and Europe. He was interested in social problems, especially the difficult lives of poor people. He died in 1870, and his tomb is in Westminster Abbey in London.
One.
Leggi, ascolta il testo e indica se le frasi sono vere, T, false, F, o se il testo non lo dice, DS. Charles Dickens was a British writer. T. 1. When he was a young child, he lived in a big house. 2. His father was in prison for 24 years. 3. Charles worked in a factory for 3 years. 4. Charles left the factory and went to work in an office. 5. Charles wrote about child workers in his novels. 6. When he was famous, he forgot about the problems of poor people. Glossary. Characters. Personaggi. Unfortunately. Sfortunatamente. Prison. Prigione. Forgot. Dimenticò. Married. Sposò. Tomb. Tomba.